The first race of the season in Australia has ended, and we will comment on it together shortly. But before going into the analysis in detail, I want to make a brief comment on Ferrari, who finished in 8th and 10th position, far from the top teams who instead always finished in the top positions. It's really a waste. It's a shame that this race ended this way. In my opinion, what I regret most is that it was a crazy race in the end. They started with intermediate tires, then switched to dry tires. They put the intermediate tire back on. It was a race with several twists and turns. And despite this, Ferrari comes out of this weekend with 5 points less than stake F1 team. I mean, do we realize less points than Sauber? This is really a waste, in my opinion. It's true. The performances were not there apart from Ferrari today, because we are now going to see everything in detail and we see the comparison with the top teams. However, Ferrari could have scored more points in this Grand Prix, but made several mistakes, in my opinion. And it's a shame. It's really a shame because the other teams managed to exploit the maximum, let's say, potential from this Grand Prix. Some more, some less, obviously. Before we start, please leave a supportive like, subscribe if you are not yet subscribed, and now let's go see everything in detail. So, first, let's look at the final standings of the race that sees Norris's victory, which we will now also see how Norris performed in the race. However, despite everything, he had a good race. Finishing in first place, he made a small slip with dry tire when it was raining, but if we won, he still managed to handle the pressure. At the end of Verstappen, behind second, precisely, Verstappen, who since he was the most valuable player of the day, was the driver who brought home as many points as possible because in the second place it was the most he could do. He managed to put pressure at the beginning on Piastri to overtake him, then he managed to put pressure on the two McLarens when the track conditions were wet and he was still with a tire from shooter. He managed not to make mistakes, guys. Verstappen made no mistakes and put pressure on the others to make them, so these are the conditions of Ali Max. We saw it also last year in Brazil. We know in Max's history, the races on the wet are in his favor, but they show us the great talent, the four-time world champion that he is, so great race by Max. Max third, Russell... Also, Russell, anyway, did his race. He managed to bring home the third place, which was the maximum from Mercedes. He arrived fourth in the end. Kimi Antonelli, because this ranking is not updated later, I will show you the correct one of the points, because Kimi Antonelli received a 5-second unsafe release, which was then removed because Mercedes provided the necessary evidence and the onboard from the roll loop, the onboard video to the road loop, and so they removed the penalty. So fourth Kimi, great race. Now we will also comment on it in detail. Fifth Albon, sixth Stroll, seventh Hülkenberg. To find the first Ferrari, we have to go to the 8th position of Leclerc, 9th Piastri, who also put himself, it was all my fault, he made a serious mistake with dry tire in wet conditions. This is true. They were very difficult conditions, but his opponent, his teammate, did not make that serious mistake. Like him, and in his home Grand Prix, a pity, because Piastri finished in 9th position. Hamilton is 10th instead, and here too, Hamilton could have done a little more. He was overtaken by Piastri in the end. It's a pity the car's performance wasn't there. Beyond the individual incidents of Leclerc and Hamilton, who perhaps could have acted differently. Now let's see, especially in wet conditions, what could have been done differently to extract the maximum potential from Ferrari. However, beyond everything, the car's performance was not there, so we immediately discard the theory of the wet setup, in the sense that Ferrari prepared a setup like everyone else, a bit more loaded, but it did not show real potential on the track. There was no pace, guys, there was none, and this is a great pity. We saw from the first laps with intermediate tire that Leclerc couldn't even keep up with Russell at times. He was there with Russell trying to play it, but up front we had McLaren and Verstappen who were playing a different sport. I conclude the ranking just for completeness. 11th Pierre Gasly, 12th Tsunoda, 13th Con, 14th Berman, 15th Lawson, 16th Bortoleto, 17th Alonso, 18th Sainz, 19th Duan, 20th Aguiar. Let's say it was an elimination ranking. There were many retirements, many drivers hit the wall, many drivers went off the track. So whoever managed to finish the race, let's say, brought home the maximum points. He was also good at not making mistakes. I'll also show the standings for both the teams and the drivers. This team ranking that sees McLaren in first place, Mercedes second, and Racing Bulls third, which only brought home the points of Verstappen due to Lawson's retirement, fourth Williams, fifth San Martin, sixth Kick Sauber, seventh Ferrari in the constructors after this first race. It's really a shame to see a Ferrari that comes out with 5 points at this Grand Prix. Really too few. And then I also want to show the drivers' standings so we can all look at it together and then analyze step by step each episode of the race that I want to show what could have been done differently, what penalized one driver, what penalized the other. On the other hand, Norris scored 25 points, Verstappen 18, reflecting the first race standings. Leclerc earned 4 points and Hamilton 1. Really a shame for Ferrari because it's a wasted opportunity. These are those crazy races like Brazil last year where you can bring home the maximum potential, but in this case it didn't. Exactly, Ferrari. Among other things, the thing that I'm sorry is that we have seen so many mistakes and so many abnormal situations. For example, this one of Leclerc, where he complained about having the seat full of water and therefore he had a leak. First he said, I had a leak and I have the seat full of water and therefore it will be the water that the drivers have available on the car. And so we can say that it was also a bit of a discussion topic on social media. We have seen various memes about it, saying that everything happens to Ferrari a disappointment. It's a shame. Now I'll show this graphic. It's a shame because it's talked about a lot, even among the English media. There's been a lot of talk about this behavior of Ferrari, that everything happened to Ferrari in this Grand Prix. Many misfortunes and mistakes, but we must emerge stronger from these situations, in my view. Of course, it's true that compared to the other top teams, Ferrari wasn't able to capitalize the most, and it's a great shame. Let's analyze each situation in detail. First, let's start from the formation lap if we want something already happened to him, and then we go step by step to analyze everything. I'll also make my own comment at the end.
So, formation?
Everyone started with intermediate tires, except Stroll, who started with full wet tires. The focus is on Liam Lawson. Then Ajar has already retired before the start of the race. In fact, he made this mistake. Pity for the Franco-Algerian driver because he immediately hit the wall after turn 1, guys. This is a pretty serious mistake. Indeed, without enough. It's a serious mistake because you can't make a mistake in turn 1 and go off track. It's true you're a rookie, but he was really sorry. Pity to see him retired already like this. Let's move on. Here also the mistake of Duan. He immediately hit the wall, here too, and then there was the safety car. So with the start, at the start we saw a great start from Verstappen, who immediately took the second position on Piastri. We also saw a good start from Leclerc, who immediately placed himself in 5th position, chasing Russell. He blocked Hamilton and Leclerc a bit, then we'll also see the video of the start, but now let's move on with the second lap. Under safety car, we also saw the retirement of Carlos Sainz. However, an experienced driver in Williams, like him, should not have made that mistake. Instead, he made it. So from this moment on, we understood that it was a bit of an elimination race in the sense that it was a difficult race with very slippery conditions in sight, and therefore it was not easy to keep the car within the circuit, the track. Let's move on with the, well, here they also proposed the start again with Verstappen, as I said, who managed to take the second position. Here, Hamilton blocked a bit by Leclerc, and Hamilton, unfortunately, having done the first part of the race behind Tsunoda and Albon, has paid the price, in the sense he was much more detached compared to everyone else. Here we see the first pit stops to put another tire. Then here, Hamilton, who says in the team radio, "Let me know where I am slow." Among other things, there was an intense communication between Hamilton and Riccardo Adami on understanding how to improve performance, have that energy boost also to overtake Albon, but he was not able to do so. A very difficult first part of the race for Hamilton, this subjective, because he was in Albon's RS zone, but he could not pass. Here we saw the only mistake Kimi Antonelli made. Kimi went long. He was lucky because he hit the grass and then spun. He was lucky to go to walls in this case, but this was the only mistake. In fact, here you can see very well that he hits the grass and then turns, going towards the barriers, but does not go to walls. In this case, Kimi, he manages to save it. In lap 17, the race continues with Norris, Verstappen and Piastri. Verstappen initially keeps pace, but runs wide in turn 11, allowing Piastri to take second position. Moving on, we see the positions gained by the drivers. There were few overtakes in front, with Leclerc being the only one to gain 2 positions at the start. Moving on, Verstappen's 23-lap intermediate tire was turning into a slick as the rain had stopped. Piastri made a small mistake, his second if we count losing the position to Verstappen at the start, allowing Verstappen to overtake him. Start, second mistake by Piastri, this long one here. In turn 7, let's move on. Here, Alonso's retirement, who goes against the barriers. Another experienced driver after Sainz, who retires. So here we really understand that the situation is drastic. We come to this moment, very important, because the teams decide to put on dry rubber. Here we see Leclerc's pit stop, and in general, all the teams have decided to put on rubber. Some, like Verstappen, have put on the medium tires, providing more grip in wet conditions. There are those who instead chose the hard, so those who chose the hard thought that it could not possibly rain. Instead, those who put on the medium, like Verstappen said, let's try to put on a slightly softer tire, to try to worry the McLarens and also obviously in wet conditions. In case we have a bit more grip, let's go on here with the slightly more worn tire. Here we see Alonso's retirement again. Let's go on, and here's safety car after Alonso's retirement, which is about to end with all the drivers lined up. And here we see the mistake made by Piastri in the last two turns at the penultimate turn, where both drivers, both Norris and Piastri, went off the track. But Norris regained control and promptly returned to the pits. So this was a smart call from McLaren, because at this moment it was raining quite a bit. And it was gonna rain even more. While Verstappen stays on track, Piastri, on the other hand, after coming back, then he also goes back to the pits to put on a tire. The intermediate tires. So this serious mistake by Piastri, in my opinion. If you are fighting for the world championship, you can't afford such mistakes, despite the very difficult conditions. But this is a serious mistake on Piastri's part. Let's move on then. Pit stop for Norris, while Verstappen stays on track. And here we have both Ferraris staying on track with Hamilton and Leclerc. They are in 3rd and 5th position after even Hamilton finds himself in 2nd. And here I ask myself, so you stopped earlier. Let's say you wanted to stay on track. Okay, don't stop and put on intermediate tire. It's a gamble. At least leave one of the two cars with dry tire on track. One you stop, the other no. Because otherwise it makes no sense to have chosen this strategy. At this moment, if after you eat your words, if we want the strategy and stop the two drivers, in the end, after everyone has stopped, it's obvious that you end up at the bottom of the ranking, and at this point, rather than bringing home an 8th or a 10th place, it makes no sense to bring home an 8th or a 10th place. Rather take a gamble with one driver, the other instead you stop and at least diversify the strategy. This is a bit my opinion. In this case, in my opinion, I have to at least leave Hamilton on track to try to gamble, and maybe you stop Leclerc. Among other things, if you want to stop Leclerc, stop him right away. Don't wait so long. Lawson, who started against the wall, withdrew in a similar incident to what happened with Ajar. Piastri also went out due to his own mistake. Additionally, Leclerc made a small error, who made this spin which didn't cause damage and managed to get back on track. We also saw the withdrawal of a Sauber and Lawson. Let's move on. Both Ferraris were in 9th and 10th positions because they stopped after everyone else. And so we have the Norris, Verstappen, Russell, Albon ranking, and so on, all the others. Here indeed is the episode of Leclerc who turned around, and here we also have Leclerc's attack on Hamilton. This is a nice attack that Leclerc made, who managed to pass Hamilton in this case, and to put himself in pursuit of the car in front. And here we have the final ranking with the race concluded, with Norris, Verstappen, Russell, and so on, all the others, with Albon 4th, but then who had passed Albon was penalized, but then the penalty was taken away. So to sum up, in my opinion, if Ferrari took the risk of staying on the track with dry tire, do it at least with one of the two drivers, and the other, if you want to put him intermediate tire, stop him immediately. This is what I didn't understand. There was a lot of indecision about the choice to make, in my opinion, on Ferrari's strategy, and they made many mistakes. Surely there is pressure on Ferrari at this moment, but it does not justify the mistakes they have made. This is a shame, because today they could bring home points. Despite the performance of the car, they were not. So I also show some other images, let's say the statements of Piastri. I show you that they are important, that he also said he made a serious mistake. In this case, we see I just have to complain about myself, because obviously among the top teams and the drivers up there, he is the one who made the most mistakes objectively today. We don't expect Piastri because he consistently performs well and maintains his composure in races. In this case, he made these quite serious mistakes, I must say, to race in the top team, to race in the strongest team at this moment on the grid. A few Ferrari memes have been circulating, which I'll also share with you. I'm having a bad day, let's make it even worse, so it's over, we're back, we're coming back, it's over again, so it's over. This summarizes Ferrari's trajectory. It's a shame because Ferrari's performances to date are not in line with the top teams. In my opinion, Ferrari is more or less at the level of Mercedes from what we saw in Australia, but I want to be a bit more positive. Be careful, this race here does not determine the trend of the next races. We know that Australia is a bit of an atypical track compared to all the others, so already from China we will see a different Ferrari, a Ferrari that can go faster. It's a track where aerodynamic load is needed. We will certainly see a more competitive Ferrari, so let's try not to base everything on what we saw today on track, because it's true. Ferrari did not convince in terms of performance in Australia. But in my opinion, it does not reflect the trend of the championship, in the sense that Ferrari is stronger than what we have seen. It's there fighting with Mercedes, maybe even with Red Bull on some tracks. It's not at the level of McLaren at this moment. But this was to be expected. In short, we saw a Ferrari in great difficulty, I have to be honest. A wasted opportunity, because there were many points that we could have brought home. Leaving a driver out is a great pity. That's the last thing I want to comment on. Kimi had a great race, starting 16th and finishing 4th, making an impressive comeback. In my opinion, Kimi had a great race despite one mistake. Let's move on. Also, look at the telemetry of both Kimi and the top teams. Regardless of that little slip, he kept a great pace. He managed to stay on track when the track conditions worsened. He also managed to pass Albon at the end, so on the track, so a lot of stuff. This great Kimi, I saw him very solid. A great performance after the little mistake made yesterday, and also the bad luck that had yesterday in qualifying. Great Kimi, because he had an exceptional first race of the season, in my opinion, from the rookies. Many of the rookies, in fact, if not all, have retired, so he was the only one to finish the race and to have a great comeback race. Let's now look at the pace of the top teams to show you the difference between the various drivers: Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, and Leclerc. I took as analysis in the first stint with tyre.
Intermediate, so
I didn't take Hamilton because he was in the traffic of Williams and Racing Bulls, so I took the other drivers. You see that as a rhythm. Leclerc, Russell were more or less similar. Verstappen started to keep up with the rhythm of McLaren, and then he raised his rhythm because he lost the train. You see that the McLarens make a difference compared to the other drivers. They were on average 1.5 seconds faster than everyone else, and so at this moment, McLaren is the reference car. The data shows us this both in dry and wet conditions. Now let's discuss Russell Antonelli's performance. Despite facing traffic and having to overtake, he maintained a strong pace comparable to his teammate during the first stint. This is the difference between Leclerc and Hamilton in the first stint, and we see that, well, Hamilton also had traffic, but the pace was more or less similar in trend. Obviously, consider that Hamilton had traffic preventing him from pushing to the maximum, but he also had drag reduction system from Albon providing some assistance. Having a reference in front of you when the surface is wet can help you push a little harder to
limit. Tell me
how you saw this race, and if you also think it's a wasted opportunity apart from the Ferraris, because beyond the performance, more points could have been brought home. Tell me what you think. I'm curious, reading and responding to all your comments. As always, I remind you to leave a like, to subscribe. Enable notifications to stay updated with new videos on this channel. Check out related videos from Rastro. See you in the next video.